Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast, your home for Pittsburgh Penguins news and analysis. I'm your host, Nick Belsky, joined as always by Nick Horwat. And if you didn't already know this, you can find us on YouTube at Tip of the Ice-Burgh. Make sure that you like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff, or you can catch us anywhere you get your podcast from. The offseason just keeps rolling along, Horwat. We had the NHL draft this weekend. We will recap a very interesting 2 days in kind of Los Angeles, but also in the city of Pittsburgh from the decentralized NHL draft. We'll also discuss what didn't happen on draft weekend, at least as of this recording. And then we'll preview what's to come with free agency just over 24 hours away. Let's get started on the Tip of the Ice-Burgh. And let's kick things off with the NHL draft. First and foremost, before we get into what the Penguins did, because they did a lot, what did you think of the format? Decentralized, didn't speed up the process whatsoever, but hey, it was something that they tried.
It was certainly something they tried. I do not know if they're going to ever do that again, which I find very weird. I honestly didn't mind that they were giving it a shot. Because every other draft is decentralized and seems to go over, at least in the NFL's case, and I guess the NBA's case. I saw some tweets about that. Pretty well. Just the execution. I will also admit I watched it on mute. I was also working my other job, so I had to kind of see half of it and watch on mute. And from what I saw,
that was probably the best thing you could have done.
Yeah, so I didn't see or hear really any of the technical difficulties. I did see the awesome moment of the Islanders taking Schaefer first overall. Luckily caught that. That was really cool. And honestly, without seeing much else, the highlight of the whole draft for me. And Roger McQueen being taken to Disney was the second biggest highlight for me of the draft.
I mean, cherry on top was also Adam Sandler announcing James Higgins from Boston College to the Boston Bruins. I think that was pretty cool.
I did miss that, but I saw the clip on Twitter afterwards. That's how I caught most of the draft picks. I think it was just clips on Twitter afterwards. If there was anything cool, if there was anything fun. But yeah, I didn't see or hear any of the technical difficulties. I found it hilarious that each draft pick got taken into a interrogation room immediately. I thought that was really awkward and not necessary. But overall, if there's a different, fun, entertaining way of centralizing it again, by all means, also speed up the process. I get these kids want their moment and are deserving of their moments, but man, it's tough to watch a draft that long. And again, I got lucky. I was able to work through it and not really watch, but the fact that the show that I was working was over at 11:45 and the draft ended about 10 minutes before that really says something.
Here's the thing. I can save you an hour right off the top, NHL. Instead of Gary Bettman walking his ass the whole way to the microphone to announce who is going to announce the pick, how about you just have a PA announcer that says, announcing this pick for the Utah Mammoth, Tony Finau. And then you cut right to it. It takes Gary Bettman a while to get to center stage. These stages aren't small. So I can save you an hour by just doing that. But outside of the actual production of the draft, the Penguins walk away from draft weekend with 13 new players in their organization, the most picks that they have made in an NHL draft since 1994. And here's the thing, in 94, there were 11 rounds, and that is still the last time that they took 13 players, 7 picks in the first 3 rounds, 3 first-round picks, only the second time in franchise history, the first, of course, being 1984, where they got a pretty good player. 1.1 in 84. So hopefully history repeats itself, maybe not to the magnitude, but hopefully they get a pretty good player out of one of the 3 that they took in the first round. Let's quickly run down the 13 names, and then we'll parcel this out a little bit more. First round pick, 11th overall, Benjamin Kindel out of the WHL's Calgary Hitmen. Then at 22nd overall, they took Bill Zannon out of the QMJHL. At 24th overall, they took Will Horcoff out of the University of Michigan. In the second round, they traded back up to take Peyton Kettles, big defenseman, out of the Swift Current Broncos of the WHL. They took Charlie Trethaway of the U.S. National Development Team in the third round. They also took 2 other picks in the third. Gabriel Daigle, who's a goaltender from the Q, and Brady Peddle, who was a defenseman from Waterloo of the USHL. Then going down in the 4th round, it took Travis Hayes, brother of Avery Hayes, if you're familiar, of the Sioux Greyhounds. Ryan Miller goes in the 5th round of the Penguins. So does Quinn Beauchene and Jordan Charon. In the 6th round, they take Carter Sanderson of the Muskegon Lumberjacks, and they close it all out with Cale Dock, a center out of the Sherwood Park Crusaders of the BCHL. So that is a laundry list of players that we're going to see this week at Penguins Development Camp, which we'll get to in a minute. But Horwat, that's the list. Those are the players drafted. What are your overall thoughts on the Penguins 2025 draft?
Well, first of all, I applaud you for making it through that list pretty cleanly, I must say. That's a lot of names of guys we don't know, and a lot of teams with not easy names to pronounce, but as I look at it, the first thing I notice is no European talent coming in. That's all North American based junior teams, so they're already familiar with that sort of style. I know that that can be a difference maker when it comes to developing prospects in an NHL organization. Looking down it though, nothing jumps out off the page, but that's okay because the sheer size of it is the page. And I like that a lot. I like that there is a ton of lottery tickets, is the way that Jesse Marshall put it last week. I enjoy that. I also, I'm not afraid to say that I like that once again, Kyle Dubas kept everyone on their toes. Hey, if this name is available, maybe he'll trade up to get this player. Maybe he'll do this to do that. No, he's sneaking in Benjamin Kindel and Bill Zannon in the back door. Again, he's keeping us fresh. He's making sure we're not settled in our seats one bit. But I'm excited about the amount of lottery tickets here. I'm excited to see what can happen, whether it is within the organization or through trade pieces down the line, of how these players, these kids, can help the Penguins organization, whether it's on the ice or via trade. It's going to be entertaining. And I like that Sean Horcoff's son is in this and making us feel all so old.
Yeah, when I saw that, I was like, I am old, aren't I? And then my wife said, yeah, I can see the gray hair from here. And I said, that's enough of that. I don't need that. I don't need that. I don't need that. But no, like you said, the sheer size of this draft class is kind of what it's going to be known for. Now, of course, some of these guys, I think it was Wes Clark who simply said, a lot of these guys aren't going to make it. So we're hoping, and you mentioned lottery tickets. It's something that that Wes Clark also mentioned. His quote from his availability over the weekend was, quote, "The more lottery tickets you have, it increases your chances to hopefully hit." And that's how he described this draft class, is a bunch of lottery tickets. And really, you could describe any draft class that way. But I do think it's interesting that you mentioned it's a lot of North American talent. It's a lot of people that you're going to have visibility of because they're going to be playing in the CHL. They're going to be playing in the NCAA, and they're going to be playing in these places that is going to allow you to not only see them in general, but see them play against each other, right? How many names did I just mention that were from the QMJHL and from the WHL? Not to mention Harrison Brunick plays in the WHL if he doesn't make it to the NHL this year, or I believe he's also eligible for the A. Tanner Howe was line mates with Benjamin Kindel last year. So you talk about visibility, that might be the exact reason that they took Benjamin Kindel in the first round. And honestly, that's what I want to get to next, is a lot of people are going to come away talking about this draft, considering what Dubas did in the first round. I mentioned it off the top. 3 first-round draft picks, the second time in franchise history. The first time was in 1984, and they did draft Mario Lemieux if you didn't take the hint the first time around. But 11th overall, they stick and pick. Kyle Dubas said after the first round that he did try to get up, but as you noticed, nobody traded out of the top 10. So there was no move to be made, apparently. He sticks and picks, and he takes Benjamin Kindel. A little bit of a surprise. I was shocked. I think we talked to Jesse Marshall last week. I think he would have been shocked, considering he said the best case scenario for the Penguins would be to have 11 and 12 and have Victor Eklund and Kashan Aitchison available to them and then draft both of them. Well, the exact scenario happened, and Kyle Dubas said, once you think you have the answers, I'm changing the questions. So they take Benjamin Kindel. They trade the 12th overall selection to the Philadelphia Flyers for 22 and 31. They stick and pick at 22, taking Bill Zannon out of the queue. And then they trade the 31st overall pick as well as the 59th overall pick to the Kings to come back up to 24 to take Will Horcoff. What did you make of Kyle Dubas' first round? Because that's what's going to be talked about here for the next year or so among those that talk about drafts and prospects for the Penguins.
No doubt. Those will be the three names to kind of keep an eye on the most out of this, I think. I mean, others will kind of emerge from the cloud of smoke, but these will be the main three to sort of really keep an eye on in terms of Kindel, because again, two popular names that the Penguins were kind of half linked to were available, and Kyle Dubas went another direction. And I'm just so intrigued to see where it all goes. How do I look at Kyle Dubas' first round? It's tough to say. It's really tough to say, just because there were so many moves that the Penguins were involved in that didn't involve players. Just kind of Kyle Dubas adding these lottery tickets. That's all it really was. Just sort of these, we're going to just keep adding and adding and adding. Eventually one of these will have to hit. Something will have to happen. If not, you got a heck of a prospect pool to deal away from. I'm looking at it as, especially in the first round, because 3 first-round picks, I mean, you could get into the minute details of, well, it's a 24th, so it's closer to the second round than the first. If they were picking 31 still, or 30, whatever it was, that's essentially a second rounder. Regardless, there's a 1 next to their names in terms of round. So they'll be the ones to watch mostly. And curious to see just how they develop. I just want to see what they can do. And I'm excited about the picks that Dubas chose. I'm excited about Dubas, again, just keeping everyone on their toes. I'm just excited to see all of that.
Now, I'm not afraid to say that when I look at Kyle Dubas' first round on Friday, I'm a little disappointed. And it has nothing to do with the players that they took. They still got 3 very talented prospects. I like Kindel. He's a smaller winger that could potentially form into a center. He's fast. He has loads of talent. And then Zannon and Horcoff, you know what I like about them? Big boys, especially Horcoff is 6'5" at 18 years old. I think Zannon is upwards of 6'3" as well. But these are big guys, not to mention the fact that the second rounder they took, Peyton Kettles, is a large defenseman. I mean, listen, we got a really, really big defenseman out of Swift Current a couple years ago in Owen Pickering. He looks pretty promising. Hopefully Kettles can kind of follow in his footsteps. So again, I'm not disappointed in the players that are coming. I'm excited about those players. And honestly, all 3 of them are likely surefire top 10 prospects once we redo the list at the beginning of the season. Once we see Dev Camp, once we see Prospects Challenge, and once we see how they fare at the beginning of the NHL training camp, their first as a member of the Penguins organization. Once we get to that point and we parcel out who the top 10 is, all 3 of these guys could be there. But here's the thing I'll look at. When you look at what we were talking about last week, I was in love with Porter Martone. He ends up going to Philly. Okay, not much you can do about that. You look at James Higgins. He goes to Boston. Okay, not much you can do about that. But letting both, not one, but both, Victor Eklund and Kashawn Aitchison fall to your division rivals in the New York Islanders. Guys that, listen, I understand. It's not the end-all, be-all. Draft night is the beginning, not the end for a lot of these guys. So there's still a lot to be seen about everybody the Penguins took. But to me, I had my heart set on some of these guys, and it gets a little disappointing whenever they go up there. And I'm not somebody who dives super deep into prospects. I had heard a little bit about Ben Kindel. I had heard very little about Zannon and Horcoff, because we didn't think we'd be picking in the 20s. We thought we'd have 11 and 12, and you'd get 2 top 15 prospects. And I think consensus on Kindel was somewhere around 18 to 19. So it feels like in their top 15, where they could have had 2, they ended up with a guy that probably would have went 18, 19 had they not selected him. Again, maybe they didn't, but I think just overall, personal belief, personal thought process, I left Friday night a little disappointed. Yes, there was stuff to hang your hat on. They came away with 3 first rounders instead of 2. There's still a lot of talent in these 3 guys. And again, I'm excited about these three. I'm not putting it on the 18-year-olds at all. I think they could be three very successful players in the future. But when you look at the guys that we had been talking about for the last couple of months leading into this, to come away with none of them just leaves you feeling like you missed out on something.
I get that too. I get that the Penguins collected lottery tickets here. They collected 13 lottery tickets. However, from some of the conversations that we had and some of the the prospect deep dives of guys like Aitchison and Eklund, those are lottery tickets also, yes, but they're lottery tickets with 4 sets of numbers on them. They're a bit bigger. They're a bit more along in their process. They're a bit more known. Like you said, you had only heard a little bit about Kindel. You would, we know Horcoff is a former NHLer's son, which can get you pretty far, but also now it is up to the lottery ticket to hit for him. It's Kyle Dubas did the thing of, it's not big braining it, but he's building it in his eyes. And again, by distracting with names that seems like he's into, and then sneaking guys in the back door. And yeah, sure, he reached a little with a couple of them. So be it. This draft, I don't want to say it was quantity over quality, but on paper, until we see what all these guys can do in a camp, on ice, in Penguins uniforms, and as they start progressing and developing, right now it is quantity for quantity's sake, and that's not a terrible thing.
Yeah, now here's the thing. What is one thing we've heard about the Penguins prospect pool over the last couple of months? Everybody said, well, Kyle Dubas has done a pretty good job in his first 2 years. It is definitely much further along than it was when he walked in the door, but a lot of people are saying it lacks depth. And I think that's something he tried to address. Not that it was just quantity over quality. They were probably looking for quality too, and I think they got that in a lot of these kids. But there was definitely an emphasis on quantity, taking 13 players over the last 2 days. So I think that all in all, Kyle Dubas had himself a pretty good draft. But here's the thing about the NHL draft. It ended 27 hours ago, based on when we're recording this. We're not going to have the answers tonight. Nope. We're not going to have the answers next week after development camp ends. We are not going to have the answers until a couple of years down the road for most of these guys, maybe even longer for some of them. But as we sit here right now, yes, I was a little disappointed in the first round outcome. But I will say, all in all, I thought it was a solid weekend for Wes Clark, Kyle Dubas, and the Penguins organization. Now, there was one trade thrown in there, and here's another reason why I think overall I like what I saw this weekend. Even though it didn't meet the expectations I had, I do like what I saw. They trade Connor Timmins and Isaac Beliveau to the Buffalo Sabres. They get back Connor Clifton and the 39th overall pick. Why do I think this is a great piece of business? Because Connor Timmins is somebody that you literally got for nothing. You got because Boston and Toronto wanted to make a trade and they needed somebody to broker. So you got him for nothing. You turn him into a second-round pick, not just a second-round pick, but a higher pick than you entered the weekend with. And instead of picking 2 players at 11 and 12 and waiting until 59, you end up with 4 top 40 picks in this year's draft. A team that is just really seriously kicking off their rebuild, 4 picks in the top 40 is a nice way to supplement an already expanding prospect pool. So I liked what he did with the trade. Connor Timmins looked fine with the Penguins, but you replace him with Connor Clifton, who again is another flippable asset on the Penguins blue line. Yeah,
for what it's worth, I like Connor Clifton a lot. So I'm not angry at the move, even if he stays. And if he doesn't, there are players ready to take that spot already within the organization, especially if the Penguins are gearing toward young this upcoming season, and just depending on how good or bad they want to be. We'll see what free agency brings as well, but we'll talk about it. I don't think it'll be much.
All righty. Well, Penguins development camp is coming up right after this draft, of course, July 3rd, to the 7th next weekend at UPMC Lemieux Sports Complex. Maybe I'll get up there, get some eyes on some of these kids, and maybe that feeling of disappointment will just dissipate after I see some dazzling plays from Benjamin Kindel and see the sure size of a guy like Will Horcoff. So I'm excited to see what some of these kids do in their first foray as members of the Penguins organization. Let's talk a little bit about what didn't happen this weekend, Horvat, because a lot of people were expecting some trades. And like I said, there was a trade. the Connor Clifton trade, blockbuster if blockbuster ever was. But Bryan Rust, Rickard Rakell, Erik Karlsson, as of this recording, and things can change, still members of the Pittsburgh Penguins.
And I think things will be changing soon. I bet you will all hear this episode before things do change. But man, I'm going to start with Karlsson on this. Suddenly, Vegas is down a very big name defenseman with Pietrangelo being out for the year. Can Kyle Dubas offer you a slightly used and discounted? I'm sure
there's
Kyle
no retention slots as of right now.
I'm sure Kyle wouldn't mind discounting some of this deal. And Erik Karlsson, which, I mean, if Vegas is also, I mean, if the reporting is also to be true, they're big game hunting on Mitch Marner. So, hey, Erik, we know you have the say here on where you're heading. Vegas is getting Mitch Marner. You're going to take the place of Alex Pietrangelo, at least for a year, likely for a couple. Mm-hmm. That sounds like a good deal for you. That sounds like a good place for you to go to. The place they already have Jack Eichel, Mark Stones will maybe be healthy. They're keeping William Karlsson around.
Hey,
you played a season with Riley Smith. Did you like that? Do it again. I think that would be, at least for Erik Karlsson's sake, if he was to do it, sounds like a pretty good scenario to go to.
Listen, he wanted to go compete when he came to Pittsburgh, and it didn't work out. There's a place that's only competed. Like every season that they've existed, they've competed, and that's Vegas. So if there's a place to go for that, it is in Nevada, in the desert, plus no state tax, which, that's a big thing, I guess.
That's a big thing, apparently.
So the question I'll ask, and I'm guessing I know the answer to this, are you surprised that a deal didn't get done during this draft for one of these three guys?
No, seeing what Dubas did with these draft picks, I'm not that surprised.
Not only that, the market didn't seem hot, did it? Leading into the NHL draft. Obviously, Noah Dobson, 2 firsts, and Emil Heineman, that's crazy, but this is a guy that was putting up video game numbers last year. But, I mean, Zegras for Paling, a 2nd and a 4th.
Woo.
JJ Peterka went for Michael Kesselring and Josh Doan. It felt like the market was firmly kind of in the camp of the buyers. And if it's not going to be good, why trade away a guy like Bryan Rust, right?
Add on John Gibson, and it was very much trades of, these are guys that just want trade to do it now.
Yeah.
That's all that it was leading up to the draft. Now, post-draft, it's going to be, all right, let's actually make some hockey moves here. Bryan Rust could be among them. Buffalo might still be involved in that for that good old Rust-Zucker reunion that I cannot wait to see. There, I'm going to give the 2 cents. I think Buffalo is a great destination for Bryan Rust. I mean, I know we know hockey players want to continue competing, but Bryan Rust has 2 Stanley Cup rings. He's had his 30-goal season. Collect some friendship points, go back to Buffalo, and maybe build something great there. Honestly, like maybe things finally turn around while Rust and Zuck are there. That could be something really fun to look forward to. I say, at least for me, Buffalo fits the best for him.
I'll say this. I still think the value of Bryan Rust on the team is something that I would have to be blown away by. But considering where Buffalo is expected to be next year, an unprotected first, Bowen Byram, and a Melvin Fernstrom level prospect will get me to the table.
Yeah.
Because an unprotected first in next year's draft
is
giving you another kick at the, especially if it's from Buffalo, it's giving you a kick at the can at Gavin McKenna.
Absolutely.
So that's what I'm hunting right now, because you have the 13 prospects now. You're hoping they kind of develop over this next year, and then you're hoping you can maybe swing McKenna in here and try to get as many opportunities in that lottery as possible. An unprotected first from Buffalo is about as clear cut as an opportunity at that first overall pick as you can get.
Yes, absolutely. If any team, not just the Penguins, if any team gets an unprotected first from Buffalo in a trade this upcoming offseason, who's the GM up there? I forget.
Kevin Adams.
Kevin Adams needs to be fired into the sun immediately.
I mean, look at the Peterka deal. You should have got more back. I like Josh Doan. I think Michael Kesselring has proven that he's a decent NHL defenseman. But for JJ Peterka, I understand you're trading him without a contract, but you had to know that contract was going to get signed.
Yeah, but also again, it felt like just trades of dudes who don't want to be in the place they're in.
Yeah.
And we know Bryan Rust wants to be here in Pittsburgh. So that could be another reason why it just didn't take off yet, is just the market at the moment was people that don't want to be in their places right now.
Not to mention, Bryan Rust does have a full no trade clause for another 2 days.
Oh, yeah, I guess that could do it too. That being said.
Again, I still would probably prefer to keep Bryan Rust if you could. You're never going to get that kind of value for Rickard Rakell, but not that kind of value, not an unprotected first, a Bowen Byram and a Melvin Fernstrom level prospect.
Yeah.
But I would rather keep Bryan Rust on the team. I still firmly stand behind that, what I said a couple weeks ago. But man, you just look at the draft next year and you think, if you can start, like, you didn't have to trade any of these guys to come away with 3 first rounders this year. If you can start utilizing these types of guys and then, of course, add some in the course of free agency that could turn into higher draft picks, you could have back-to-back drafts where you seriously bolster the future of your organization through just kind of like a flash rebuild, where you got 13 picks one year and potentially a couple of very high leverage picks in 2026.
Yeah, you're totally right about that. There could be some really big swings for draft picks coming down the line. Listen, if you're Buffalo, there's no reason to deal away your first round pick. There's not. Like, that's kind of why I'm with you in this sense. Like, I think Buffalo makes a lot of sense for Bryan Rust just on paper. And I don't know. I just don't see a first round pick getting dealt out of Buffalo just because of the Gavin McKenna of it all. Again, fire the whole organization into the sun if teams like the Sabres, Sharks, Blackhawks, Penguins, I mean, they won't, but Penguins, or any other bottom feeder team, if they trade away an unprotected first, fire the GM immediately. Like, there's no need for that this upcoming draft. And that goes for Buffalo too. I think you could still get a solid deal done with a second round pick for with Bryan Rust involved and some of those other pieces you mentioned. Again, it isn't the big swing of a first rounder digging for McKenna, but it's a bit more of what we just saw the other day of just number of picks, just lottery tickets. If it's worth anything, teams continue to prove you don't need a player like Connor McDavid to win a cup. You don't need a player you don't quote unquote need a player like Gavin McKenna to win a cup, possibly. Some of the best players in this league, it takes a long time. It's not easy. The Penguins have just been blessed with Sidney Crosby.
And it has to be in the right place. Sam Bennett, was he a superstar? Was he an $8 million player before he got to Florida? Sam Reinhart, talking about Buffalo, was Sam Reinhart a superstar, pay him all the money type of player? No, he wasn't. Matthew Tkachuk was, but not to the level that he has been in Florida.
He was an entertaining star. He was pure entertainment value.
He was mostly rat, also star. Now he is superstar with a little bit of rat tendencies, and he's in the perfect place. So it is not just, sometimes it takes time. It's also sometimes it takes finding the right spot. So it's not all about the first round 1.1 to change your organization. That's just been the path for the city of Pittsburgh over the past 40 years. So I'll say this. Yeah, Bryan Rust, Rickard Rakell, and Erik Karlsson. Of those 3, by the time we record next Sunday, how many of them will have been dealt?
Karlsson's going to take a while. Again, I've been saying that for a while. If he gets moved, it's going to take a while because it took a while in the first place. There hasn't been a lot of discussion around Rakell, so I could see that one going first, just because to continue with Kyle Dubas' trend of, hey, everyone's distracted by Erik Karlsson and Bryan Rust. Rickard Rakell has been dealt to the Los Angeles Kings. Yeah, I just threw a team out there. I think they might be a team involved, but I just fired a team out there. So I could see Rakell going first. I also wouldn't be shocked if Rust started the year on the team, to be so honest.
So let me expand it a little bit, because I think next week is a little crazy considering Tuesday's the opening of free agency.
Yeah.
If in a couple of weeks, like let's say the end of July, how many of these 3 will have been dealt? Because at that point, the first wave of free agency is over, the second wave of free agency is over, and teams have a pretty good idea of what their salary cap picture is going to look like, and if they have the flexibility to add on a big guy or a big contract in Erik Karlsson.
I'm Yeah, I'm going to continue sticking on just one, and that being Rakell.
Mhm.
Because I do think Rust could start the season on the year. Maybe that's a deadline move. Um, and like I said, everyone's distracted by Rust and Karlsson right now. And I just think the Karlsson is just going to take time. Like, I think
Mhm.
there will be at least a week of insiders reporting and updating on a Karlsson situation.
On
Like
what yard line it's on?
we'll get the first inkling of the Penguins have approached him. Oh,
Yeah.
there's the first story. Then 2 days will go by and it'll be here's the number of teams calling.
Mm.
2 more days will go by. Erik Karlsson's mulling it over. Like that's how it's gonna go. It's gonna be a slow burn. So I could see that one lasting through into August. And if it's Vegas, maybe that goes a little quicker, but
Yeah,
I
because
can see that one.
Vegas doesn't have reservations about who they're trading away. They never do.
No,
I think it'll be 2 by the end of July.
two. All right.
I think it'll be 2. And
I think two
honestly,
is possible.
I think Karlsson is it's a timeline thing, but I would be surprised if Erik Karlsson is on this team when training camp rolls around in a couple of months. And then I think it's going to be one of Rust or Rakell. And honestly, I think it's going to be Rickard Rakell. I think Kyle Dubas holds both in very high esteem, but I think he just holds Rust. There's a reason Rust has worn a letter whenever there's been a vacancy for a letter. And
Absolutely.
I think that is something that is held very close in that organization is the value of Bryan Rust. So I think it's going to take a crazy package. And again, an unprotected first in the McKenna sweepstakes is what I think it gets the ball rolling. And then I think it has to be another substantial piece and then probably another lottery ticket at the tail end of it. So I might be crazy. I might be overvaluing Bryan Rust, but everything that we've seen up to this point makes it seem like Kyle Dubas holds Bryan Rust's value at a very high level, and he's not budging. He didn't budge at the trade. He couldn't because Rust had a full no move clause, but he didn't budge at the trade deadline for Rakell. He hasn't budged to this point with Bryan Rust, and we'll see if and when things change once Rust's no move clause walks out the door. But let's close this out with free agency because in about 24 hours, free agency will be open. The moves will be fast and furious. A lot of the top guys will have found homes. The Penguins themselves, they will have $19.6 million in salary cap space walking into this, according to Puckpedia. They've already signed 12 forwards, 7 defensemen, and 2 goalies to the NHL roster. So not only do they have space, but they don't have a lot of spots to fill it with. So what type of players do you believe we will see Kyle Dubas bring in this week for the Penguins organization?
Let's see. You said the Penguins have $19.6 million in salary cap space. I bet by the next time we record, they have about $16 million of cap space. If it maybe even more. Make it 17, actually.
Yeah.
He's not signing big deals, first and foremost. Kyle Dubas is not going to sign a big deal. That'll be a next year problem. I could see he's going to try and probably re-up Tomasino, maybe re-up Connor Dewar, and P.O. Joseph needs another deal, but who knows how that goes. I think that he'll knock those out just for sake of getting those RFAs in. Any UFA on this team is out of here. And by any UFA, I mean Matt Grzelcyk and Matt Nieto.
Well, I disagree on one of those.
All right,
and
fair enough.
It's not Matt Nieto. I mean, look at the Penguins' left side right now. I think there's a chance the Penguins bring back Matt Grzelcyk. I think they're letting him go to market and see what's out there for him. But I think if there's not a bustling market for Matt Grzelcyk's services, I think that the door will be open for him to return another season, maybe on a 1-year deal, more likely, maybe on a 2-year deal, but he still comes back with full knowledge that he is a flippable asset.
Yep. And you're right. I did just look at the Penguins left side and
Barron.
You want to see a tanking team's defensive core? Their left side consists of Ryan Graves, Ryan Shea, Vladislav Kolyachonok,
and Owen Pickering.
Owen Pickering, missed that one. Thank you. Owen Pickering and P.O. Joseph.
And Joseph
might not even be there. Yeah.
Yeah, he's not even signed.
I just kind of listed all the left shot defensemen here, but yeah, I mean, it'll be a fascinating little situation. I just don't see them making big signings. I don't see them taking on anything at all. It'll just be a couple of, like I said, the RFA signings that Dubas wants to get done, and I got nothing else in terms of who or what he could target, because the type is, hey, you're going to be here for a year while we suck. have fun. Here's $775,000.
Yeah. Well, now the qualifying offer deadline is at the point this is debuting in like an hour and a half.
Yeah.
So you'll know if they offer guys qualifying offers about an hour after you turn this podcast off, if you're listening to it as soon as it goes up. So odds are, who they let walk to free agency out of the RFAs and who they're continuing the restricted free agent process with going into the remainder of the summer. But as far as unrestricted free agency goes, it's exactly what you said. It's the exact same as last year. And the word that I used, it's HGTV-esque, but it's exactly what it's going to be. Flippable assets. July 1st of last year, who was signed? Anthony Beauvillier, traded for a second-round pick. Matt Grzelcyk, expected to be traded, didn't get traded, but definitely was a flippable asset. Sebastian Aho would have been flipped if he had any value, but sometimes that's what you call a risk that was worth taking and one that didn't pan out. And then Blake Lizotte got the 2-year deal. And again, Lizotte going into the season probably looks a lot like Lars Eller. If he has a hot start, he's probably out of here. So I think it's going to be a lot of flippable assets, a couple names that I think are possibilities that you could see signing to the Penguins in the next couple of days. Anthony Beauvillier again makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? Doesn't it? I mean,
yes, it does. Yes, it does. I haven't looked at the free agency list yet, but yep, that makes sense. Just because, hey, welcome back and peace out, homeboy. Like,
yeah, did you like the slight resurgence that you got that made you worth a second-round pick at the trade deadline? Come back and do it again. Come back and do it again. You had success here. We'll give you another contract, and then we'll ship you to a contender.
We'll try and find an actual cup contender this time and not Washington. Yeah.
I mean, they were in the President's Trophy race.
They were, and he got to witness history with Ovechkin. But man, you're right. You're right. I like that choice a lot. That's hilariously, I like that choice. That's so funny.
Okay, outside of Anthony Beauvillier, guys that I like, guys that on one hand are hustle guys. On the other hand, are guys that also are hard to play against, which Kyle Dubas has stated through various outlets. Josh Yohe, mostly of The Athletic, has kind of perpetuated this, that they want to get harder to play against. Nick Cousins is available. Not a player that a lot of people are going to get excited about, but definitely a player that's going to make it harder to play against the Penguins. And Brandon Tanev, the last time he was an unrestricted free agent, he signed a 6-year deal in Pittsburgh. He is now an unrestricted free agent once again. Maybe he comes to the Penguins and maybe he makes them a little bit more difficult to play against. Not only that, it's a little bit of protection around what's going to be a lot of young players in the Penguins' middle six this year. So those are a couple names that whenever I just quickly look at the list of UFAs, that stands out to me as flippable asset that makes the Penguins harder to play against in the interim.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't even think of Tanev. I'm actually a little surprised he didn't re-up in Winnipeg, but yeah, I think that's a good choice too. Trying to find anyone new, and I just can't, because who would turn into a flippable asset here?
Well, and here's the thing. We're not used to this, right? In Pittsburgh, you're used to looking at the top of the free agent pool and saying, who fits in Pittsburgh? Now you have to scroll down at least 4 or 5 times, and then it's like, that's the people that are going to fit what Kyle Dubas is looking for. And those are the type of people that are going to look to sign in Pittsburgh, is the second tier, third tier, fourth tier of player in this free agency cycle.
Yeah, no kidding. I think I can see a Nico Sturm, Cup champion, comes in on a 1-year deal because he was more of a utility guy in the playoffs. Mm-hmm. Penguins stick him in the lineup somewhere. Yeah, and then does okay. Maybe shows he can still perform. I mean, he's not that old. He's only 30, but shows that he can carry on his status as a Stanley Cup champion. And that's flipped somewhere to another contender. Hey, Nico Sturm, welcome back to the Stanley Cup final somehow. Something like that. I think that could be a good little target. As I continue scrolling around, it's just a bunch of names where Nate Schmidt, same situation. Who knows what he's got going on? I think he might be able to land a big-ish deal somewhere to kind of
multi-year deal, which the Penguins I don't think are going to be very interested in handing out.
And then you get into the question of it by way of your recycling of Brandon Tanev. Do they want to dig into centers, and would someone like Nick Bjugstad make sense for a year to flip at the deadline?
Maybe
comes in, proves to be a decent third line guy, maybe even second if Gino has to get moved to a wing. Hey, he's performing pretty well. I feel like that's also a scenario Bukestad's been in before, at least back when it was Arizona. His name's on the trade block. He's playing well. He's in the rumor mill, and then nothing happens. This time around, Kyle makes it happen.
Yeah, you know why I like that? That sounds, and again, it might be rude to think this way. That sounds like a perfect placeholder for allowing Tristan Brose and Philip Hollander to make sure that they are polished and ready before they actually get everyday spots, or at the very least, an opportunity to prove that they are ready for everyday spots at the NHL level. I think Brose is a guy that I expect to push for NHL playing time this year, and certainly Philip Hollander, who had himself a really successful season over in Europe last year. I think that's a guy that you're going to look at to hopefully fill in a spot at some points this season down the center of the ice. So I like bringing a guy like Bukestad because not only does he play center, but we've seen in Pittsburgh that he can move to wing if need be. I think he's a good placeholder option, just as like Kevin Hayes is right now in the lineup as well. And just as a Blake Lizotte is going into a contract year as well. So I think a lot of this week is going to be focused on center or on forwards, excuse me, because the Penguins are they're all booked up in goaltender as of right now, unless something happens on the trade market. And defense, I think they're going to leave light. Jack St. Ivany is a guy that we need to see. Is he somebody we should continue investing in? Owen Pickering is going to be ready for another extended look. And what about Harrison Brunick? Like, is he ready to maybe take a couple steps forward, maybe to make a jump and see what he's doing? Because he was really close to getting a cup of coffee at the NHL level last season. And he had himself a pretty good year in the WHL. Signed his ELC. I think that that's another player that they might leave the light on for this season. And again, it all depends on how he performs. I'm excited to see the development camp rosters. I would imagine that he's brought in this week to be in development camp. And honestly, that's a guy that if he does well throughout all these stages of the offseason, I wouldn't be surprised to see, especially if Erik Karlsson gets dealt, I wouldn't be surprised to see pushing for NHL playing time at some point. Maybe not early in the season, but at some point this season.
For sure. I'll say this too. The Penguins actually, when it comes to this idea of signing and trading at the deadline type of player, this is a heck of a free agency class to do it with, because it's not a good free agency class. It's highlighted by Mitch Marner, Mikhail Granlund, Brad Marchand, and then Matt
Besser's out there too.
Besser's out there. Matt Grzelcyk's the 9th highest scorer among upcoming UFAs.
Wow.
So you like the way you said, you have to scroll 3 or 4 times to find players. Scroll twice, really, to find the kind of guys you're looking for. Lars Eller's out here with an opportunity like that. He wasn't overly productive, but compared to this free agency class, it's a lot of those guys that it's bring in. It can be flipped almost right away. So the Penguins, for what it's worth, like I said, they're not going to go after the obviously not going after Mitch Marner. That ship has sailed as much as we tried. They're not going to Mikhail Granlund being number 2 is so funny. But they're not going to go after a guy like him. I mean, unless we get the same Mikhail Granlund.
No. Don't make
End the episode. I'm starting to spin. But well, you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. They're not going to go for the cream of the crop. That's just not where the Penguins are in free agency. And if you were expecting an exciting Tuesday afternoon, probably should have just tuned into the draft, because that's the most excitement you're going to see outside of a trade of one of the big 3 that we talked about earlier, the Russ, the Rakells, and the Erik Karlssons. That's the big bombshells that you're awaiting the remainder of this offseason. You're not going to get it in free agency, and you sure as hell are not going to get it with a Sidney Crosby trade. Kevin Weeks, stop embarrassing yourself.
George Laraque.
I don't know where you came from. You came off the top rope and you went right into thumbtacks. Like that was just a swing and a miss from both. So, we'll close it out with a PSA. Anybody who says Crosby is going anywhere, don't value their opinion anymore. Sorry, Weeksy. You're not an insider to me anymore. You're just a television personality. But that is going to do it for this episode of the Tip of the Ice-Burgh. Throw it in at the end.
Why not?
Thank you guys so much for tuning into this one. Remember, you can find us on YouTube. Make sure that you just take a slap shot to that like button, share, subscribe, all the other fun stuff, and make sure that you can also find us anywhere you get your podcast from. We'll see you guys next time.